let's get going. So today we're going to look at weather hazards in greater detail. The question we're going to be looking at is assess the extent to which tropical storms have effects on people and the environment. 9-mark question. So when you get started with this question, focus on highlighting the key words in the sentence itself. So in this case, you've got assess the extent. So you've got to look at different factors, not just one factor. You've got to look at tropical storms. So I would probably highlight that word and then give some examples, Typhoon Haiyan, for example, or Hurricane Katrina, whichever one that you're going to be using. And then underneath people, I'll write down social or economic impacts, just very, very quickly. And then I would write down the environmental damage that may have occurred on that particular event that had happened. Now, for both of those, before I even start answering the question, I would have bullet pointed some key facts before writing in detail. As always, if you're revising at the minute, then make sure that you give yourself that breathing space. You've got that time to really embed the knowledge. The way that you can do that is by creating a little template for yourself inside your exercise book or a lined piece of paper that you're working on, or even if you are going to be typing in the exam, you can type this out. So on the left-hand side, you can write down the tropical storm example, whichever one that might be. Use your textbook, use your notes. Then impacts on people. Bullet point some examples with some facts themselves, give some examples, and then the impacts on the environment. So those are going to be physical impacts on the environment, not human impacts. Again, both of those, bullet point them, and then once you've done that, you can move on to the next question. So here's an example of an answer you've got here. Tropical storms can be extremely deadly to people. 8 people were killed on St. Martin, showing that tropical storms are a danger as they are powerful enough to kill people. Similarly, when Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines in November 2013, it caused 6,300 deaths. Most drowned in the surge and left 220,000 people homeless, indicating that it was a huge danger to people's lives as it killed so many, but it was also a danger to property. The amount of deaths tropical storms cause shows they can have a devastating effect on people themselves. So this is a really good answer, a very strong answer that's been written. The candidates referred to specific examples, 8 people being killed, so that's an impact on people. It then qualifies that by saying that this has resulted in fatality. It goes on to talking about how many more people were killed in Typhoon Haiyan as a contrasting example in a specific time, a specific place, and also gave an impact on social impacts on people, 220,000 people left homeless. Also indicates that this was a danger to property, not just to people dying, but also to wider long-term impacts. So in terms of this, if the candidate would write like this for the environment, then the same would apply. If they carried on writing like this, this would be in the top band category. Next, tropical storms can be destructive to the environment. Not only do the 70 miles an hour winds uproot trees, but extensive damage to human property, as shown by the overturned shipping containers, which can cause debris to spread, polluting the environment. Typhoon Haiyan caused multiple landslides, which destroyed an extensive amount of flora, indicating other detrimental effects tropical storms have on the environment. So, this paragraph gives some examples. So it talks about 70 miles an hour winds, which is the tropical storm of category 1. Talks about uprooting trees, so that's a direct impact on the environment itself. And talks about how shipping containers were affected by it. So obviously damage to human property, but it also talks about the spread and pollution of the environment because of the debris caused by those shipping containers being overturned. Also talks about multiple landslides and talks about flora, really good term to use, and their impact on the environment. So again, for a GCSE answer, this would be a very strong paragraph, lots of detail, lots of different examples of how the environment has been damaged. And again, if the candidate wrote like this, but for the human element, then this would go on to get a very strong mark too. Next example. An example of environmental impacts can be shown by the 2010 Haiyan storm. The storm caused a huge tsunami that destroyed and killed wildlife. You can see in the news report that 95% of the island was destroyed by Hurricane Irma, which also destroyed lots of wildlife. Now, this answer is a little less detailed. It's obviously using a resource that's been provided in the exam itself. However, it is a little bit generic and vague. So, for example, where it says the storm caused a huge tsunami that destroyed and killed wildlife, that is absolutely true, but would be better is if we refer to what particular habitats were destroyed or particular animals may have been affected the most by it. Also, again, reiterates that point later on, saying that destroyed Hurricane Irma, which also destroyed lots of wildlife. So repetition is the key point. Again, is not going to get you additional marks at all. So be careful when you're writing your exam. Refer to a specific example, then give some evidence for it, and then say why this is such a big impact. Are you talking about people, or are you going to be talking about the environment itself? It's very important that the finer details of your answer are really referred to. Facts and figures from your own knowledge are going to be very, very important. Whilst in some cases you might have availability of information in the exam through a resource that they might give you, always have the backup of your own knowledge, because that is what's going to get you up into the 9-mark bracket, 4-mark bracket. And that way you have a contrasting example, or even validate the example that you've been given, or the resource that you've been given in the exam itself, to be able to write a much more detailed answer. Often candidates rely completely on the resources that are provided in the exam. They copy and paste from that, and that's fine. That will get you, 5 marks, maybe out of 9, 4 or 5 marks, but that's half marks, right? Why not go for the full marks? Just know a couple of key facts on the impacts on people and environment from your particular case studies that you're currently revising, and then you can go away and revise the rest afterwards. So, just to reiterate again, for this 9-mark question, assess the extent. You've got to talk about different things that affect people and the environment, obviously caused by tropical storms. In this case, you can talk about very strong wind speeds. That could be one thing that affects people, their homes, their communities. You could also talk about how strong winds affect the environment by uprooting trees. You can also talk about the extent to which maybe there's a lot of rainfall, okay? Then you could talk about how that could lead to an impact on people because of flooding of people's homes, as you may have seen through the storm surge caused by Hurricane Katrina. But you can also talk about how the environment might be damaged by the flooding, and how animals might be killed through that process, because of either through mudslides or landslides, or even through flooding itself. So your structure of your answer has got to refer to a different factor for each paragraph as you're going through. In this case, you're going to have about a page and a bit to write your answer. So before you start answering the question, make sure that you have written down some factors above the assessed extent. So as I mentioned, wind, talking about storm surges and so forth. Identify your tropical storms that you're going to refer to. Make sure that underneath the people bit, you've annotated some facts, and maybe 220,000 people have been made homeless long term. And then underneath the environment section, write down trees uprooted, farmland destroyed, people have, not people, but animals, livestock has been lost because of storm surges and so forth. Okay, in the case of, depending on which example you're using, the cases might vary. Okay, so remember, highlighting the keywords, annotating them before you start answering the question is going to have a major impact on the quality of what you end up writing. One thing that you must refrain from doing is just diving into the answer as quickly as possible, because what will often happen is you'll write a bunch of text which is not even relevant to what you're saying, or you're repeating yourself again and again, and that won't get you the top marks that you're looking for. Now, you might have a question, do we need to write a conclusion for assessed questions? Generally, you don't need to write a conclusion for assessed questions, because all you're doing is identifying a factor, giving some evidence for it, identifying another factor, giving some evidence for it. And at the end of each of those paragraphs, you can say this has had a significant impact, more than on the people, more than it has on the environment, or vice versa. If you feel strongly about it, you can write a conclusion. Here's an example of one that you could write potentially, but remember that this is not an answer. Okay, so I've written here, overall, I think that X, that could be a hurricane, has created many social economic effects on people, such as, or you might say economic impacts on people, such as, and then mention some. And then you could say, however, overall, the environment has been more significantly been impacted because. Now, that's not the right answer, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of what you could potentially write. You might argue that actually the impacts on people is much greater than the environment, and then you can just validate that. But in my opinion, what matters more is you giving the different factors, validating those factors, as long as they are different all the way through. So 3 probably strong paragraphs of varying factors on people and environment would help you to get very strong marks in the exam itself. Okay. Are there any questions about what we have covered today? I keep repeating this again and again. It's very, very important that you practice doing these exam questions. So hopefully once you've watched this video, you can go away, write the question down and do the exam question. Don't just watch this video and then move on to something else. Make sure you sit down and revise it. It will come up on your GCSE exam in the summer. Annotate your answer before you start answering it. If you're stuck for ideas on how to write answers, then you can always come back to this video and watch the sample answers and use those to help you construct your own way of writing. Remember to write in third person and write with a sense of authority, because that will communicate whether you truly understand something. And the way that you do that is by using key geographical terms and having accurate facts and figures in your answers throughout. So go away. If you haven't revised this topic yet, make sure that you are reviewing your notes on this topic. If you have old assessments that you can use, dig those out and write your answers for those questions in the weather hazards topic, and then obviously go back and review this. Tomorrow we'll do another session on physical geography topic, which will be helpful for you, and then we'll crack on with some other revision material as well in the week. Right, have a lovely day. I'll see you tomorrow.